Nick, thank you so much for being here today. You are the wine guy. How does one become the wine guy?
Well, how much time do we have? You said two, maybe a two-parter. Um, it all started back in the 90s. I was looking to join the Navy out of high school, and when I went to the recruitment office, I said I want to cook on a Navy ship. That's what I wanted to do. That was my dream. Don't ask me why it was my dream, but that's what I wanted to
Interesting.
do. The Navy wouldn't have me because of some physical stuff for
Hmm.
me, so I decided to go straight into the culinary world. Part of that involved going to culinary school,
Hmm.
and in culinary school is really where I found my love for wine. I was able to, taste wine from all over the world, and pre that experience, my only wine experience was, Mad Dog 2020 and a Night Train and Boone's Farm and all of that good stuff.
I know all of those varietals. I'm very familiar.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So I really fell in love with wine. Then I stayed in the culinary business for a while, got out of the culinary business, went
Mhm.
into the entertainment business for a number of years as well. So I kind of lost that part of me. When I moved to California with my wife in 2004, it was shortly thereafter that my father-in-law decided to buy a vineyard in California, in Central California. So boom, came all of that coming back to me, the flooding back to me. So for many years in the Monterey, California area, about an hour south of San Jose, which we talked about a few minutes ago,
Yeah.
I ran the wine program for our company, our family company. I made wine, farmed grapes, all of that stuff. And what I really fell in love with was the education part of it.
Mhm.
Not only educating myself, but educating others on wine. And fast forward to today, that's what I do.
Do you ever get sick of wine? Do you ever get sick of drinking it and trying it?
I would say no. I do get tired of, the same old,
Hmm.
I try to discover new things, whether that's region or grape or vintage or whatever difference there are always trendy wines hitting the
Hmm.
market here or there, a little orange wine and organic wine and this and the other. I try to do it all so I don't get bored with doing the same thing over, and of course as a somm or sommelier, you
Hmm.
have to keep your palate trained at all times.
Yeah.
So yes and no, mostly no.
Yeah, that's a happy to hear.
Yes.
And at the vineyard, what type of wine were you producing?
I was, and the family still is to this
Oh.
day, producing Pinot Noir, which
Mhm.
is the biggest production, Pinot Gris as
Mhm.
well, and Chardonnay. And my understanding is they just planted a little Syrah on the property too. So,
Very cool.
yeah.
And your experience, in the culinary world and wine from years before, and then actually in practice in the vineyard, how did it differ for you? How did that translate over? And, what is it like working at a vineyard? I mean, it seems like a dream, but it's work.
It's very hard work,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that's a really good question. My experience with wine through culinary school and in the culinary world
Mhm.
was really more the service of the wine and me experiencing the wine itself,
Mhm.
and then passing that along to my customers as well. Um, the difference in working in the vineyard and in the winery is, I mean, I would definitely say much more appreciation for the product.
Hmm.
because most people who sip on a glass of wine don't understand everything that goes into making that product.
Yeah.
Well, this wine is so expensive. It's, $85 a bottle or whatever the case is. And do you understand the people and the labor and the hours and the dirt and the water and the grime and everything else that went into making that bottle of wine. And I would like to say, especially in the rest of the world, but here in the States as well, most winery owners do it out of the love for the product and the love for the work. So also developing that into it as well. There's a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and hearts put into a bottle of wine beyond the obvious grape juice,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. So I would say the big difference for me was learning to appreciate it more as a product as opposed to just something to get tipsy on.
Right. Yeah. When you were approaching the wine and what the flavor palette would be,
Hmm.
this is an odd question, but do you approach it as the vineyard itself, as an American style of that wine, of, the original grape style of that wine? How do you sort of give it that definition and identity?
Well, so in the wine world, we define really, and I'll start at a very high level and I'll
Okay.
work my way down to answer that question
Hmm.
the way it deserves to be answered. In the wine world, we start at a very high level in defining wine as either old world or new world
Okay.
wine, and we can think of those definitions as the old world equals Europe.
Hmm.
The New World equals everywhere else they're making wine on the globe.
Okay.
So that is inclusive of the United States, it's inclusive of Australia, New Zealand, South America, South Africa, et cetera, et cetera. China. China is a big wine producer now
Hmm.
as well. Um, that is a very high level definition. Now to break it down even further, old world style, old world winemaking is it's very traditional. It's steeped in a lot of culture and tradition, and it's made this way, and it has been made this way for 1,000 years or 8,000 years or however long they've been making it in that
Right.
particular location. So the French, the Spanish, the Georgian, the Turkish, um, the Italian, they all have a very specific way of making certain wines, and it's very much steeped in culture. The New World, not so much. Culture has
Hmm.
less to do with it, as does innovation and trying to keep up with the Joneses, maybe
Hmm.
a little bit as well, is the wine market is flooded, as we know. If you walk through any wine aisle in a grocery store or your favorite wine shop, you're going to see 1,000 different labels,
Yeah.
in that on those shelves. So we're all trying to keep up with that, in wine production. So I joke often with my customers, my clients, is particularly here in California or the U.S. as a whole, we tend to be the Wild West when it comes to winemaking.
Hmm.
It's we're gonna try the new thing, we're gonna shoot that shot, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna really have fun with the process of winemaking. Well, and I wouldn't just say winemaking; it even goes down to how the grapes are planted, where they're planted, what soil they're planted on, what varietals you are planting in a certain area, because not all grape varietals thrive in certain areas.
Hmm.
You've got cool climate grapes, you've got warm climate grapes, and in between climate grapes. Um, So here in the States, we can kind of, without tradition and culture holding us back, we are able to really have fun
Hmm.
and experiment with our wine production. That is why we have so many different things on the American market versus the European market, as an example, and I'll use a very specific example of Chardonnay. Everyone knows that big, buttery, creamy Chardonnay that we make here in
Yeah.
California.
Yeah.
It was a style that came very became very popular maybe about 30 years ago, and it's still popular to this day, not as much as it was 15, 20 years ago. um, However, California Chardonnay has become synonymous with that style, although I would say maybe only 10% of Chardonnay that's produced in California is of that style. And you're not going to find that style anywhere else in the world, at least not to that extent, at least not to that big, over the top,
Yeah.
voluptuous, Chardonnay. You're not going to find that many other places. So that was an experiment that turned into something amazing for the winemakers. At the time, Napa Valley became, again, synonymous with producing that big, bold, voluptuous Chardonnay. So that's a good example of how things differ. Whereas you take that same grape in France, and they've been making it in Chablis, for example, which is where the heart of Chardonnay is in France. It's very reserved. It's very light. It's very
Mhm.
clean. It's crisp. It may or may not have been oaked in a barrel, yeah, put in a barrel for a particular amount of time. So stylistically, it's much, much different.
Yeah, that's
And I
great. That's so helpful to hear like all of that together. And can you talk a little bit about China? I guess I'm a little surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised in terms of like the market is there, but
Sure.
it's a massive country, so it makes sense that they're probably similar to the United States in terms of like lots of different types that they can produce. But I wouldn't
Yeah.
have thought of it as like a wine producing area.
Yes, absolutely. I read something recently. I think it's 70% of the countries in the world produce wine to some level.
Hmm. Wow.
The last I just read that maybe about 6 months ago,
Wow.
something like that. So China is a huge market. China has been buying up high-end wines and, for that matter, high-end wineries
Hmm.
for many years. I don't know exactly when it started, but they have started producing wine. You're never going to find that wine on the shelves here. Well, here in the
Yeah.
States,
Yeah.
you're not going to, definitely. But it's much like you find some Spanish wine on the shelves here in the States,
Hmm.
but most of the wine, I think 90% or 95% of the wine that they produce in Spain is consumed in Spain.
Yeah.
I would say probably close to 99% of what's produced in China is consumed in China as
Got it.
well. What varietals they're producing, my understanding is that it's all over the map.
Hmm.
They do, to your point, have a very similar. They're in a temperate zone, just like the U.S. is. I mean, not as much south. It gets a little more tropical, in the south of China, but more central China. They're able to grow Chardonnay, Cab, Pinot Noir, et cetera, et cetera. Grapes are not indigenous to North America, South America. They're not indigenous to um, New Zealand or Australia. Grapes are from Europe.
Oh, okay.
And that's why we call that the old world.
Old world. Got it.
Georgia, the country of Georgia, not the
Yes.
state, has been producing wine for 8,000 years.
Yeah.
You know,
I
it's
I was blown away when because, again, like I'm certainly not an aficionado, but in my 20s when I started learning, more about wine and I thought Italy, Spain, France, and then when I learned about Georgia and some of the other European countries, and you're just like, holy cow.
oh
And
yeah.
so this sort of is a segue into what else you have like the best job ever. Like, and
Thank you.
actually,
I appreciate that.
when you said 90% of Spanish wines stay in Spain, and so going to these countries and actually experiencing the wines, can you talk about the travel along with wine and, how you've helped people do trips that are wine based and maybe some of the exciting regions like Georgia, for instance.
Hmm.
And I think Croatia is another one that's like another country that has some exceptional wines. Like, and I just wouldn't
Absolutely.
have, that's not what came to mind at first. So can you talk a little bit about some of those trips and why you would go to a country? I mean, I know why I would go to a country on a wine trip, but what maybe someone who hasn't thought about that, like why would you go to a country and to experience that wine and what types of things can someone experience there that they wouldn't necessarily get here?
Absolutely. So the first thing I will say about all of that, and this is something that I imbue on, or I try to imbue on my own podcast, as well as everyone I meet and talk to about wine and educate about wine, is I don't feel that you can have a good outlook on life or overall view on life without having experienced other people's experience.
Mhm.
And the only way you can do that, in my opinion, is to get and whether it's get out of your county or get out of your state or get out of your region or get the hell out of your country.
Yeah.
It's go visit these places. Um, and that way you're going to experience their culture, their traditions, their food, their people, their wines, all of that stuff. It's been a real eye opener for me, for someone who didn't travel a ton in their childhood.
Hmm.
It wasn't until my early 20s that I traveled outside of the country,
Hmm.
and I immediately fell in love with it, and I've
Yeah.
been doing it as much as I possibly can ever since.
Yeah.
My wife and I share a love for traveling all over the world, and our goal is, before the end, we want to be able to travel to every place that is safe to travel to.
Amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So with that being said, and I'll tell a little story here. We spent 2.5 weeks in Eastern Europe last spring,
Hmm.
and we went to 8 different countries in Eastern Europe. It was on a river cruise ship, so we started in the Black Sea, and we sailed all the way up to Vienna, Austria, stopping in Bulgaria, Romania, um, where else? Austria, of course, Hungary, and Prague, Czechoslovakia, et cetera, et cetera. And we absolutely loved every minute of it because I had not had a ton of experience with wines from those regions. Again, just because of scarcity here in the States, they're
Sure.
hard to get a hold of.
Sure.
You're not going to and I'm speaking generally, of course, you're not going to find a shelf that says Romania on it,
Right. Right.
at your local wine shop or in the
Yeah.
grocery store. It just doesn't happen. It's very, very hard to come by. I think there's maybe four or five retailers in the United States that actually carry Romanian
Wow.
wines.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, they're absolutely outstanding. As are wines from Bulgaria and wines from Czechoslovakia, etc. Croatia, and you asked specifically about Croatia. We did stop in Croatia during that trip, and the people. and the wine and the food. I've got pictures of a winery storage area, not a production winery anymore, um, that goes all the way back to the 1700s. It's absolutely mind-boggling, what they've been doing there, and the wine is fantastic.
Mhm.
Beautiful white wines, big decadent red wines. They're doing some really, really fun stuff. So, that trip, and to finish answering your question, that trip really sparked something for me where my business has transformed from just education to really getting out there in the world and having people come along with me to places like that, Europe, Australia, et cetera, where I'm working with travel advisors to book these small group getaways that are 100% wine and food related. You know,
That's
um,
tough, Nick. I mean, what a
I know.
sacrifice.
I'm sorry.
My hat is off to you. I mean, that's a tough gig. That's amazing. And I love, hear to what you said about travel and getting outside of even your own town, city, like
Hmm.
it doesn't have to cost a lot. If you can travel outside of the state and outside of the United
Yes.
States in particular, go for it. It's always money well spent, in my opinion. And but what you said earlier about the vineyard experience that you had, and it's the
Hmm.
people, and it's so much more. It's this living, breathing organism. And so what you're saying with this and traveling and taking small groups there, you're really getting more than just, the glass and tasting it. You're seeing it and the community and the history and the culture. Can you talk about
Yes.
how all of that interplays with these trips that you're going on and the education aspect of it?
Sure. So most of the trips that I'm looking to book and that I have
Mhm.
already booked are multifaceted in that there's absolutely a fun and relaxation element to it.
Sure.
If it's a vacation, then you do need that part of it. So keeping people interested by talking about wine and food throughout the experience. And I'll use this one as an example. I'm going to Europe again in November of this
Mhm.
year, and it's going to take place on another river cruise. I'm working with a company called Ama Waterways, which is an excellent river cruise company in Europe. Actually, they've got cruises all over the world now, but it starts in Switzerland and it ends in Amsterdam. And we're going to see, I think, 5 countries during that trip. And on each one of those days, there are going to be opportunities for the guests to get out and visit a vineyard where they'll get to talk to the someone from that company. I'm not going to say the owner,
Sure.
but not typically the case, but someone from the production,
Mhm.
of that wine, whether it's the winemaker or the general manager or someone. That's typically who it is, and I will be there along with the trip, adding color,
Mhm.
helping translate,
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
things that they might be telling people, and making it a very fun and interactive experience,
Mhm.
for the guests that are going along. There are typically tastings that happen, during those times as well, so people actually get to sip the wine that's made on that particular property. And then when we get back to the boat, I will be doing individual seminars
Oh, wow.
on the local wines. I'll be doing wine and food pairing dinners where we're creating a meal around the wines from that region, and so on. So the experience is going to be, It's going to be as interactive as you want it to be. It's going to be as educational as you want it to be. It's going to be as relaxing as you want it to
Mhm.
be. And I think that's super important. So, does that answer your question? That's a very high
Yeah.
level view,
Yeah, absolutely. And
of the
it's
breakdown.
yeah, absolutely. And I have a question out of that, but it sounds like the kind of thing where you can have no experience and just want to learn more, or someone who's fairly experienced
Oh my goodness, yes.
and you can speak to both. And, I imagine there's a ton of options in terms of where you're going. And it's nice that you have the experience to be able to choose and translate and, what I think is so nice about working with someone like yourself is I always say this about a restaurant, right? Like they're not going to put something on their menu that doesn't sell. So having someone
100%.
who's an expert who understands wine in a very different way and understands what that experience is going to be, it must be so relaxing to just go and listen and try and learn for the guests. So that sounds amazing. If you have an extra spot, I'm
And I
there in
would add on
November.
there for me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me too, I'm always learning something new,
Mm,
on these trips, so and that's a big reason why I do them.
yeah. So something you said about, usually you meet with the general manager, and this may be boring, but what is the business of wine? Like, how does it work? I kind of always just think of this glamorous, like Francis Ford Coppola commercial that I've seen of like, the light
Right.
that's behind you right now, and some dude in jeans, like looking at a grape. Like, how does it work? Like, what is the business behind wine?
Excellent question. The the business of wine, as most agricultural products go, I would say the business of wine is very similar to the business of orange juice.
Mm, hmm.
It's a very similar concept. So it all starts on the ground. It all starts with planting the vines correctly. It starts with the farming the vines correctly. Making sure that they have everything that they need to grow well, quickly, but not too quick.
Sure.
Producing the right amount of grapes, on each vine, to produce the best quality grapes and things like that. So that's where, again, my point from earlier is my appreciation of wine. I didn't appreciate wine beyond what it does for me,
Sure.
before. But having the experience in the vineyard, it really opened my eyes to the people that tend the grapes, the people that pick the grapes, the people that till the soil, and all of that stuff. So the business of wine starts right there.
Mhm.
People might think that the most important person in a winery business is the winemaker. I would say no to that. The most important person in a wine business is what's called the vineyard manager.
Mhm.
That is the farmer, if you will, that tends those grapes.
Mhm.
Because much like orange juice, if you start with bad oranges, you're going to get bad orange juice. And similarly, if you start with bad grapes, you're going to get bad wine. Um, so that's step number one. And then I would say from there, going into the winemaking process, I could talk about this subject for hours and
Mhm.
hours and hours, but I'll make it really simple. Wine making is 50% science and 50% art.
Mhm.
And it's being able to take those two things and blend them together and make a beautiful end product out of it, is one of the coolest things in the world. I got to do it and I got to see it firsthand for many years. Working at the winery, and the winemaking is a huge part of it as well, actually producing the product. And then I would say from there, winery, vineyard, wine businesses are much like every other business. There's sales and marketing.
Right.
In a lot of cases, there is a brick and mortar shop where they're selling the
Sure.
wine or tasting the wine, and so on. Even in this increasingly online world, you people still want to go to this place and taste the wine in this place. You
Right.
know, whether that's Sonoma or France or Georgia or Australia, they still want to go to these places and experience the wine in those places. So there's usually at least some kind of a place to do that. You know,
Yeah.
with wine businesses. Um, yeah, and then and that then just involves more people. It's
Yeah.
marketing directors and general managers and all of that stuff trying to sell this amazing product in a sea of other amazing products. You know, going back
Yeah.
to what I said earlier is, we are, the wine business is saturated.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So how do we get above the fray? How does the individual company get above the fray?
Yeah.
That's a huge part of the business.
Well, yeah, and I was just going to ask, I guess, sort of a two-part, two different things, but sort of intertwined. Is the wine industry similar to like the luxury goods industry, where it's sort of like LVHM or, like is Tiffany's and Prada and Chanel, or, like an umbrella arm, or are there still, and I guess it might depend on the area, like essentially, are there a lot of independent winemakers, or is it
Mhm.
something where it's sort of is an umbrella company with multiple wineries? Or does it just depend on where you are?
Sure. Yeah. The answer is both. I don't know the number as far as ratio goes,
Sure.
but I literally just before I got on this call with you, I was reading an article from a dear friend of mine who lives down in Australia, who's very much in the business of wine business.
Hmm.
Not so much. She enjoys a glass, here and there, but she's in
Sure.
the business of the wine business. And she just posted an article on LinkedIn talking about one of those big umbrella companies looking to divest all of their wine companies that are under that umbrella.
Interesting.
Um, the article talked about some of the reasons why it might be happening. If it really is happening, we don't know.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of those companies, especially here in the US.
Yeah.
And there are US companies that go over to Europe and buy up little
Sure.
wineries over there. There are European companies that come over here to the States and buy up brands over
Sure.
here, and it's all to expand their reach,
Yeah.
as far as what they can produce, how they can produce it, et cetera, get it on the shelves, and so on. But there's definitely a lot of that going on in the business.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, there's also still a ton of those little independent winemakers. They've
Yeah.
got 20 acres on a piece of land in California or Missouri or Virginia,
Hmm.
wherever they're growing their grapes. They're able to produce a little bit of wine from it. They sell it, and hopefully they sell it, knock
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
wood. And that's and for those people, it's certainly very similar to me and my family coming up in it. It's very much a passion project.
Yeah.
It's something that we love to do. It's something that we want to do. Um, but at the same day, it is a business,
Sure.
which is why I would say that a lot of the little guys do wind up selling up into
Sure.
those big umbrella companies.
Yeah. I need to take a moment for Missouri wine. I don't think I've ever said Missouri wine in my life, so I've got to check
Yeah,
that out after this. Um,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
and I
I,
guess that
I'll
leads.
I'll give you a little piece of history
Oh,
on
yes,
Missouri wine.
please.
So Napa Valley, here in the United States, we have what are called AVAs. It's viticulture areas, is
Hmm.
what the American viticulture area. So it's a specific region where wine grapes are grown in the United States, and we do have laws on, you know, there are laws around it. I'm not going to go into nerdy
Sure.
details about it. But Missouri and Napa Valley were both granted their AVA on the same day back in the 1920s. So Missouri has been growing wine grapes for 100 years, 100 or more years. So it's I think it was the 20s, the 20s or the 30s. I can't remember exactly which, but Missouri has been producing wine forever.
Wow.
Not as long
That's
as
amazing.
Georgia has, but for a long time.
That's amazing. And, thinking sort of an intertwining question with the sort of business behind wine, can you talk a little bit, and maybe it's not so much, I was thinking about like the marketing of wine. Like, are well-marketed wines actually worth it, so to speak? But maybe the better question to ask is, what should we be looking for? Like when you go to the grocery store or you go to the, local liquor store, wine store, like, and you just want, I don't know, like let's take a Chardonnay, right? Like as an example, and you kind of know what you like. Like,
Hmm.
what should you be looking for? Like, I don't really, I'm such a sucker for marketing. Like if it's got a cute label, I'm probably
Yep.
But when I turn around and read the back label, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And it's like, oh, this is 87 points. And I'm like, that sounds good. Like, what should we actually be looking for? And can you confirm or deny? Maybe you can do neither. Someone told me about like the punt of the bottle. I'm like, that's significant. So I also check, like, I'm like, oh, is this how's this bottle? How is this shape? But like, what
um,
should we be looking for?
sure, sure. Would it be okay if I did a little plug for my own podcast
Please do
right
it.
now?
Yes,
Fantastic.
please, please.
So please look up a podcast. It's available on Apple. It's available on YouTube. It's called Pour and Explore. Pour and Explore.
Mhm,
And that's my podcast. I've been doing it for just a few months at this point. And the reason that I bring it up is because I literally just recorded an episode, which will be available in a few weeks, about reading wine labels and being able to go into a shop and make that decision
mhm.
on what to actually walk out with. So what I'm going to say is a little controversial. Don't tell Mr. Albertson, but I don't believe in buying wine in a grocery store. I don't.
Yeah, totally.
For multiple reasons.
Wait, what about Trader Joe's?
Trader Joe's is a little bit better. Trader Joe's is a little bit better, and I'll tell you the reason why.
Okay, but go ahead with their original. Yes.
Sure. So, grocery stores, if you think about walking into a grocery store, it's like walking into a Home Depot. You're trying to find a
Ah,
widget and you're looking for the widget expert. Widget, hey, widget guy, can you tell me, can you tell me anything about these widgets? There's no one there. So
yeah,
that's problem number one.
yeah.
There's no one there typically, and again, I'm generalizing.
Sure.
I'm talking about big
Just
chain
general. Yeah,
grocery
yeah, yeah.
stores. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so that's number one. That's my problem number one with that scenario. Number two is you walk into this brightly lit grocery store that has lights on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you've got these wine bottles sitting upright on a shelf where the corks are drying out. I have no idea how long that wine has been sitting on the shelf in the bright fluorescent lights, and light affects wine. Light affects the quality of wine. So I don't know how long that wine has been sitting there. So that's number two. And I'll stop there because I think we all understand,
Yeah.
where I'm going with it. I much prefer buying my wines at a small specialty shop,
Hmm.
or very specifically a wine shop.
Hmm.
Somewhere where I can go in and I know that I can talk to maybe not an expert, but someone who is knowledgeable in the products that are on their shelves. So when I walk into a shop, let's say I had zero knowledge of wine. If I walk into a wine shop, I'm going to be able to say, hey, and I'll use my friend Roberto as an example. He owns a little wine shop here in San Diego. Hey, Roberto, I'm in the mood for some white wine. and I want something clean and crisp and citrus forward, because I'm going to have it with fish that I'm going to make for dinner
Yeah.
tonight. You know what, Nick? I've got just a thing for you. Here are three different options in three different price points. This is like this one, this is like that, and this one has these qualities. Which one sounds best to you?
Hmm.
I'm going to choose one. I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to walk out, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to 95% of the time I'm going to enjoy the wine
Hmm.
that Roberto picked out for me.
Right.
So for someone who doesn't have the expertise, that is absolutely what I would recommend to you. And if you're lucky enough to live in wine regions here in California, Missouri, Virginia, New York,
Mhm.
etc., try to buy directly from the winery if you're
Yeah.
able to. You know, um, you're going to have a great experience going there, hopefully. You're going to be able to talk to someone on the ground who's at least helping produce the wine or at least selling the wine. Who's knowledgeable about it, and I would say that is a great way to go as well. Um,
And I
you know,
think
and,
also, like, also to your point about like, if you didn't like the wine and you go back to Roberto and tell him, like this actually wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or I wanted, then they know you, right? And they can give you different suggestions, which is just, you, obviously, you're not going to get at a grocery store. Um, but when you go to a grocery store and you don't like it, you're like, oh, okay. Like there's no sort of follow-up from it.
right, absolutely. Admittedly, you're going to pay a couple more dollars per
Sure,
bottle,
sure.
for what you're going to buy at that wine shop versus the grocery store. Not always, but a lot of, but sometimes you will, but I look at that as an educational expense, is I'm going to pay that a couple extra dollars because Roberto took the time to sit down with me and educate me on those three bottles and point me in the right direction versus me using the "oh, that label is pretty" method.
Yeah, you
Which I'm
funny on
not
the
which I'm
label?
not saying is wrong,
No,
by any means. But
Nick, it hasn't been very successful for me, to be
well,
honest.
then you just proved my point.
Yeah, yeah.
I
And
love it.
I was lucky enough that when I lived in DC, we had an amazing wine store and it was great. And the more that I got comfortable with them, because you do get to know them, it was like, hey, I don't want to spend more than 15 bucks. Like this is just a fun weeknight or weekend wine, like it's just I'm just making dinner. I want something nice. Two, like I am making dinner for my mother-in-law or whatever, and I want XYZ. And um even actually it's interesting, even to your point of you keep talking about like the living community aspect of wine, like that's part of it. Like you get to know other people and other people in the shop will be like, "Oh, have you tried this? I just tried that." And it's really a special experience that
Yes.
to me I value. And the reason I asked about Trader Joe's um it wasn't actually to be funny. The wine guy at our Trader Joe's is
Exactly.
amazing. Like this wine
Yep.
that I'm drinking now, I brought the bottle. Like it's like an $8 bottle of wine or something,
Yep.
super cheap. The guy that I've talked to before has given me good recommendations, was like, hey, you get just easy breezy drinking wine. I think you'd like this. And I value that so much.
Yep.
And it's nice when I'm picking up my flowers and cheese and that sort of thing from Trader Joe's as well. But I was like, do I just have a good wine guy? But I've also seen like on TikTok, like Trader Joe's wines. If you like this, try this there. So
Yep.
that's why I was curious about them.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I kind of left Trader Joe's
Hmm.
out of that scenario is they a lot of times do, not in every market, but a lot of times they will have a wine guy
A wine guy, yeah.
or a wine girl,
Yeah.
on the floor that you can ask questions,
Yeah.
to. I like shopping at there's a little specialty grocery store down the street from me called Iowa Meats here in San Diego. It's one of the last like real butcher shops
Uh,
in this big city, where you can
yeah,
actually go and say, I want that, side of beef over there, and and
yeah,
they'll actually cut it up for you and everything. But they've got a great little wine shop as well, and I can talk to the wine buyer on the floor because he's there certain hours of the day, and I can say, well, I'm having, I just bought shrimp the other. I'm going to have shrimp for dinner. Point me in the direction of wine. Oh, here's this great Spanish Albarino that I just picked up, and it's
yeah,
awesome, and it fits in your price point. And I would say in that podcast episode that I mentioned earlier,
yeah,
that's the first thing that I start with when I go to talk to a Roberto is this is what I'm looking for, but I don't want to spend more than this. You
yeah,
know, don't feel weird having a budget walking into those places,
totally.
because you're going to have wines that are all over the map. That bottle of was that Syrah that I saw.
It's a
Um,
Cabernet Syrah. Yeah,
Cab Sauv blend. So, there are going to be Cab Sauv blends that are $9. There are going to be Sauv blends that are $99.
yeah,
So which one do I choose? Well, I don't know. If I'm Roberto, I'm going to try to sell you the more expensive one.
sure, sure, sure.
But maybe I don't want to spend $99 on it. So
Yeah,
if you come in, I want this, this, and this, and I only want to spend this.
yeah,
Sometimes you might get a, well, I can't do that, but
but
I have this.
yeah,
I don't have that exact flavor profile that you're looking for, but for that budget, I have this, which is going to be similar, or vice versa. I don't have that price point on any of my wines, but here's something that's close,
yeah. And I think the
to it.
translation portion that you spoke about earlier as well, the literal translation, but also the translation of expertise in terms of I can talk very high level, but I can't get into the details of probably what I should be describing. But being able to say, this is the occasion, this is what I'm eating it with, these are other types of wine, that translation knowledge is so important. Um, and the Robertos of the world have that and can
Mhm.
understand you, which is amazing. I was going to ask, like, where do you find the most value for your money? But I don't think that's actually a good place to take the conversation because I think I think we all define value differently. And if you're just looking
Certainly.
for a cheap bottle of wine, that's certainly easy to find.
Yeah.
But maybe a better question for you is like, what are underestimated wines or like styles, brands that we can get in the United States that are like not really talked about or not really considered? Where are you finding excitement, in maybe the world that most of us have access to?
Sure. So, I mean, the first thing that jumps out at me, I alluded to Spanish wine earlier in the conversation. Um, Spanish wine is readily available in the
Mhm.
States. You're going to find it on most shelves in most wine shops slash, dare I say, grocery store, kind of thing. But you're going to find Spanish wine. Portuguese wine is going to be the same thing. Quality is spectacular. It's not as plentiful as Spanish wine because, I mean, literally
It's smaller.
geography. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I would say that both of those places are producing extraordinary wines, and because of the amount of volume that they're producing, and this goes back to your earlier question about the wine business.
Yeah.
When you're producing any type of commodity, it's all about volume. So the more gallons of wine you can produce out of your production vineyards, the better off you're going to be. The cheaper it's going to be per bottle on the production line,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. So, um,
Well, also, shout out to the trips you're going on because when I was in Spain, now granted this was 2 years ago, the wine was phenomenal. I mean,
yep,
just it blew me away. And the food's
yes,
phenomenal. I mean, it just all
yeah,
of it was amazing. Shout out to Spain in general.
yep,
But
uh-huh,
the affordability, I mean,
yes.
like I literally there were times when I was like, no, you didn't charge me enough. Like it just It's wild to me. It's wild to me, the affordability.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point that I was getting to.
Yeah.
So I would say best bang for your buck
Hmm.
right now for me in the wine
Yes.
shop is Spanish and Portuguese wine.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
far.
Yeah.
The and I'll throw Argentine wine in there
Mm.
as well. Another great area that's producing a lot of volume of wine. A lot of it stays in country, but they
Mm.
do export quite a bit of it here to the States. Malbec from Argentina is amazing. I would say
Amazing.
Malbec from Argentina is surpassing what they're producing in France right now.
Really.
Um, and these are all wines that you're going to find for quality wines, good wines for 10, 12, 15, $20 a bottle.
Yeah.
Reds and whites. Whites
Amazing.
are going to be less expensive than reds, all pretty much always. Um, you're definitely going to find a lot of value in those products. You know, now we're recording this in the
Mm.
beginning of March 2025, and obviously we're not going to take this into a political conversation, but I don't know what tariffs are
I
coming,
was curious.
how
Yep.
that's going to
Yeah.
affect the price of imported wine, et cetera. But as it stands today, March the 5th,
At
2025.
7:26 Eastern
Yes,
time. Like,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
I have zero idea of how that
We
is
don't
going
know.
to affect, and while I'm on that subject, I would say that there are tons of regions here within the States that are also producing really quality stuff at good price
Mhm.
points. Wines from Temecula, for example, Temecula, California,
Mhm.
which is closer to San Diego than it is Napa Valley, more Southern California.
Yeah.
Good wines at really
Yeah.
good values, because they're not Napa Valley. They've not gotten to that point. And you were asking about, the Hermes of wine earlier, so something
Right.
along those lines. That's what Napa is doing nowadays is they're
Yeah.
producing all of these crazy 100, 200, $500 bottles of wine. Are they worth it if you're willing to pay for
Define
it?
worth it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. you know
and with the tariffs, I mean, I was going to ask about that, but it's just so unpredictable. Like, who
a
knows?
hundred percent. Yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah.
think to the earlier point in my astonishment at Missouri wine, like when I lived into the DC region, my partner at the time and I would go to vineyards in
Mhm.
Northern Virginia. And it not only was it so fun, not every not every vineyard was great. None of them were bad. It's kind of like pizza.
Yeah,
Like, okay, wine is still pretty good wine, and it's it was
love that.
so there's just something really special about supporting a neighbor, right? And so
Yes.
it may be a good time to if the wine of your choice rather is being affected by tariffs in the future, it may be a good time to kind of look around more locally or to explore another place and get out of your comfort zone a little bit. So I know I have to. You saying, I mean, between Missouri and Temecula, like my mind is blown right now. Like it's not where I would necessarily associate with
Sure.
wine.
And I'll take it another step further for you as well. Every state in the union, including Alaska and Hawaii, are producing wine right now.
I'm blown away. Like I would not
Every
have expected that at all. At all.
Absolutely. So with that being said, I'll break it down a little bit more for you. That wine is not always being made from grapes either. So
Wait.
so wine can be made from any fruit.
Okay.
Grapes, by far, are the most popular fruit to make wine from. But you can make wine from strawberries. You can make wine from, pineapples. You can make wine from blueberries. Blueberry. Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania. Blueberry wine was
Mm,
huge
yeah.
in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, across the river from Philadelphia, where I grew up. So it's not always from grapes, but every state in the union. The last I read, though, every state is producing grapes to some extent.
Interesting.
Whether they're making good wine out of it is another story.
My mind is blown. When I saw like strawberry wine or blueberry wine or peach wine, and you go to the different states and you see that at their farmers market or signs or whatever, like
Yeah,
turn exit 57. I thought that was just like a marketing gimmick. I was like, oh, that's not really wine. That's like Mad Dog or Boone's Farm. Like I did
right.
not think that's really, really interesting. I didn't realize that. I'm learning so much today. That's
Yeah.
I'm pretty blown away by that. And so I have two more questions. I want to be mindful of your time because I know we've talked for like an hour
No,
at
I'm,
this
I'm
point.
good. I'm good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So not that I ever overindulge, but my personal experience has been when I am overseas or at small vineyards, I
Hmm.
don't get a headache. And yet, sort of, I guess, mass-produced wine, like, bottles that I'll just buy from a local shop or sometimes the grocery store, mostly Trader Joe's. So,
Understood. Yep.
mostly Trader Joe's. Like, I get a headache after it. What's up with that? What is there something? What causes a headache in the first place, and why do you get it with some wines and why do you not get it with others?
Sure. So there's a lot of controversy in the wine world and the wine drinking world about that exact subject.
Nick,
Is
we are hitting a lot of controversial points tonight. This is
We
great.
really are. We really are. Um, so wines contain sulfites.
Mhm,
Sulfites, they can either be naturally occurring,
mhm,
or they can be added to the wines.
mhm.
Sulfites are a preservative that goes into wine. And again, they could be naturally occurring, meaning that there are sulfites in the air circulating around the vineyard, et cetera, et cetera. So no matter what wine you buy, there will be sulfites in it. That's why
Okay.
the labels will sometimes say added sulfites
Mhm.
to the wine as opposed to, not. I can almost guarantee that the effect that you're feeling, just knowing the science behind it, the effect that you're feeling is not from those sulfites. What
Mhm.
you are allergic to is something else that's in that wine.
Mm.
And the way that I like to explain it to people is, we talked earlier about coming in from the vineyard and there's dirt and there's grime and there's sulfites and there's insects and all of that stuff in a vineyard,
Yeah,
like you would expect to have outside. Those grapes are picked, those grapes are thrown into a vessel, those grapes are brought into a winery. In my experience, in the wine world, in the winemaking world, those grapes are not washed
sure.
before they go into the production line. We're really good about filtering out 99% of the stuff that's going to be in that grape juice once it's done fermenting, before it goes into the barrel or into the stainless steel tank or wherever it's going to be held before it's bottled. But we can't filter out everything, because if
Hmm.
we try to filter out everything, even down to the tiniest molecule, we're going to filter out flavor, we're going to filter out
Yeah,
color, we're going to filter out things that we actually want to have in that wine. And some of the things that are left behind are things like pollen. There are pollen spores that are small enough to make it through that filtration process before it goes into the bottle. So I tell people what you're having is a reaction, a histamine reaction to something that you are personally allergic to in that bottle. So
interesting.
if you're enjoying that bottle with a partner or a friend or a family member, and one of you is having a reaction and the other one is not, that is a histamine reaction. That's an allergic reaction to something that's in that bottle that you're having that allergic reaction to. And then I would finally say on the sulfites thing, I don't like to harp on sulfites, but I know that news at 11, to find out
Right,
why the
right,
sulfites are killing you. No,
right.
no. If you've ever bought one of those bags of lettuce from the grocery store.
Yeah.
You know, that bag of lettuce has 10 times the amount of sulfites in it than your bottle of wine does that you're drinking with that salad. Because that and most of the time they are natural sulfite. You know,
Yeah.
they're people are actually using a natural product. It's still a sulfite nonetheless, and it's still a preservative. So the fact that that lettuce is in that bag for 10 days and it's
Hmm.
green and it's crisp and it's pretty, etc., is all due to that additive that they put into that bag of lettuce. And there's a ton more of it in that bag of lettuce than are in your bottle of wine.
That is really helpful context. That's a great example. And I think this is also confirming, it's confirmation bias that I just need to move to Italy or Spain because I never have an issue. So, I
Yep,
think that's in
absolutely.
my future. Um, and then do you have a favorite wine? Like what is your go-to maybe regular night wine? And what is your go-to like special occasion wine?
Sure. I joke around a lot that I'm a mood drinker, so
Sure.
and my mood is going to change from day to day. I love mostly all wine. I'm not
Hmm.
going to say that I love every wine because that would be a lie, but I love most wines, and sometimes I'm in the mood for red, sometimes I'm in the mood for white. I'm a big rosé drinker myself. I drink a lot of
Okay.
rosé, dry, crisp rosé, not the rosé that everyone else is thinking of. Um, and but with that being said, if I were to choose a particular region or sub-region, is the region in France that produces Pinot Noir. It's called Burgundy,
Hmm.
and I am a huge Pinot Noir fan, and I specifically love wine Pinot Noirs from a an area called Gevrey-Chambertin. So that's a small region within the larger region of Burgundy in France, and the wines that they're producing there are just, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like eating a really good chocolate. You just, oh my God, this is amazing.
Have you been able
Um,
to visit? Have you
I
gone
have,
there?
yes,
Oh,
yes, I have,
amazing.
yes, totally,
Amazing.
totally.
And so I watched the documentary Psalm, which
Hmm.
like blew my mind that people were like, it's from this region and then the region within the region. And I think
Right.
it's by a river. It's probably from this farm. Like that was insane to me. Is that something that everyone can cultivate or no? Like some people just really have that additional ability.
Can everyone do it? I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that you need to have a very sensitive palate.
Mhm.
Your tongue and so on has to be very sensitive. But more importantly, is you have to have a very sensitive sense of smell.
Mm. Mhm.
Smell is 80% of what we taste.
Mhm.
That's why we sniff wine before we drink
Yeah.
it, because we're taking in the aromas from that wine, and then that adds to the flavor profile in the consumption of it. So you have to have a very heightened sense of smell and taste to be able to do it. Um, I would say it's an extraordinary. Um, sense that the people that you're talking about on the Psalm movie and the
Yeah.
master
Well,
Psalms out there,
yeah.
that's why there are only a handful of them, in the world,
Yeah.
because you have to have an extremely, I mean, extremely heightened sense of smell, and then also it comes a lot with tasting and repetition. All
Sure.
right, I
Sure.
know what the wines from that vineyard in that part of France taste like, so I'm going to say that it's that because that's my experience, with
Right.
that.
Right.
Now, I alluded to earlier, the fact that, here in the US, we take a very non-traditional view of winemaking. So you can do that what you saw on the Saw movie, it's relatively easy to do with those, and we'll bring it back full circle to how we open the conversation.
Great.
You can you can do that relatively easy with those old world wines because they are so steeped in tradition and culture, and they've been made the same way for so long.
Right.
It's That's easy to do as a sommelier. And I when I'm
That
saying
makes
easy,
sense.
it's
Yeah,
not easy. It's extremely hard, but it's easier, I guess is what I'm getting at, than doing that same thing with your California counterparts
that makes
or
total
their
sense.
counterparts in the U.S. Because people are making Pinot Noir here in California that tastes like Syrah. People are making Syrah that tastes like Cab. People are making
Hmm.
Cabs that taste like, whatever on down the line. Where they're growing them, how they're growing them, the amount of sunlight they're getting, and all of that stuff is all going to affect, how it tastes.
Yeah.
And how it smells. And then in the winemaking process, we're doing all kinds of crazy stuff too. So it's 10 times harder to do it with those wines than it is with something from France, for example.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I love how you said it was the art and the science. And then as you're describing it, it's like there's a little bit of magic in there as well. It's really,
Well, there is, just like most artists, winemakers will have their own little je ne sais quoi, or whatever you want to
sure.
say, that they add to their wine,
Yeah.
their own touch, their own technique, their own little bit of magic,
Yeah.
as you put it.
Yeah. So is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention or make sure that we talk about today?
Well, I mean, I would just love to say to your audience, if you're at all interested in learning more about wine, if you're interested in travel, please hit me up. I'm planning
Yeah,
all types of great trips over the next couple of years, to Europe, to Australia, to South America. So if that interests you at all, definitely take a look, and go subscribe to my podcast. Again, it's called Pour and Explore.
I love that. I can't wait to listen to episodes. And if someone wanted to do like, take their individual private group, is that something they can also arrange with you?
Absolutely. So the way I do it is I work with an independent travel consultant on every trip that I do. So it's basically a joint venture partnership that I have with
Hmm.
these folks. So if you were to reach out to me regarding a group that you want to put
Hmm.
together, let's say it's a family reunion, and
Hmm.
you want to go back to the old country, to Italy, and
Hmm.
you want to create a trip, to go to Italy, we can absolutely do that for you. We'll, plan through my travel partner. We'll plan, the flights if needed. We'll plan the ground transportation and all of that stuff. And I will be there to, help along with the education, the wine and food pairings, and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
It's really a lot of fun.
that's wonderful. And then what advice, knowing what you know now, and it seems like you've had a really varied career that intersects, but what advice would you give to your younger self?
I thought a lot about this question from when you brought it up earlier. I think my number one piece of advice would be to be happy in what you do. I've met too many people over the world, and in my life, and I've been one of them at several points in time, throughout my career, where I was not happy what I was doing, and it was soul crushing.
Yeah.
It was boring. It was, ugh, I gotta go do that again. Ugh, time to make the donuts, kind of
Right.
thing. So if I knew then what I know now, it would absolutely be happy no matter what you do, and whatever that means for you individually is going to obviously differ from person to person. But loving what you do is so important. I've been lucky enough to fall into what I'm doing, but it also takes a lot of hard work and learning and education and all of that stuff. But for me, it was worth every minute of book time and classroom time to learn all of that stuff. And here I am able to travel the world and do what I love to do,
Yeah.
and have fun with great folks like you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And then what do you love most about what you do?
I would say the right now, the right now me says the
Yeah.
travel part of it
Hmm.
is being able to get out there and again, which we talked about earlier, is experience new things, experience new cultures, experience new wines, new food,
Hmm.
all of that stuff. I'm an hour away from Valle Guadalupe in Mexico. So I live 20 minutes from the border. So I'm looking forward to the day that I can go down there, which is a huge wine region in Mexico. Yes, Mexico is growing great wine and
Yeah,
doing great stuff with wine. So I'm looking forward to doing that and getting to a place that I've not been before and experiencing those new things. So that's my favorite part of the job.
that's wonderful. And I was thinking about how you get to play a part in people's journeys and experiences that are so meaningful. I mean, what a what an amazing gig to have, right? And
Absolutely.
then I know we'll have your information in the show notes. Where can they find you? And where can they find our guy Roberto? Because I feel like we got to give him a shout out. Like I feel like we got to give his wine
Definitely.
shop a
We've been
shout out.
talking about him for an hour.
Yeah.
Yes, Roberto is a good buddy of mine. Roberto Avila is his name, and he owns a little wine shop just outside of San Diego called Zest Wine Bistro,
Awesome.
Zest. And he keeps just amazing stuff on the shelves. So if you find yourself in San Diego or you live here, definitely check out Zest Wine Bistro in it's called Lemon Grove, California, which is a
Okay.
suburb of San Diego. And for me, my website is thewineguy.vin, thewineguy.v as in Victor, in as in Nick. And again, check out my podcast. It's Pour and Explore. You can find that on YouTube and Apple and a few other places.
Excellent. Nick, this has been so fun. I feel like I could just keep talking to you. But I feel like I'm gonna have to book a trip because it just your energy just comes through the screen and
Thank you.
you have an incredible knowledge and I love your viewpoint. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us.
It was my pleasure to be here. I really appreciate you inviting me and awesome conversation. Can't wait to do it
Excellent.
again sometime.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers to you.